This week in Pure Reinvention.
I now, sometimes when I get those, many different phone calls in a day, I literally look at the mission statement, which hangs near my phone, and I say, I'm looking for a particular type of customer, not just any customer.
Episode 98, Kevin Shaw, Vice President of Marketing, Weiland.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where we create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. I'd like to welcome our co-host back, Jody Schaefer. Jody, how are you?
I'm good. I feel like I've been away a while.
It's great to see you on the other end of the mic.
Yeah, nice to be back.
Jody, we had a really, really good conversation with Kevin Shaw.
Yeah, I was excited to hear this one. Kevin is someone that I knew just briefly from a CEO circle. And so to hear his story and how he came to Weiland, and I really like how Weiland has thought about their succession planning. So he'll talk more about that, but key into that and how that idea of ownership plays a role in diversifying your thought.
Kevin is a key driver in the success of that organization. He's in a unique spot to make a number of observations, and I think in the conversation we'll be able to hear that, so let's listen in. We are so excited to tell you about our 100th podcast celebration party, which is going to be held on Thursday, November the 3rd at the Firebird Tavern in Greektown. Register online at Pure Reinvention 100 Episode Celebration.eventbrite.com or go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Pure Reinvention. Let's get started with the same three questions we ask all of our podcast guests, which are number one, of the 5 steps in the Pure Reinvention process, which step do you most closely associate yourself with?
I identify with the simplify step, and you'll probably find out in the next few minutes why that is, just in terms of simplifying the Weiland name and simplifying our mission at Weiland.
Focus is important, isn't it?
Exactly.
So, Kevin, what is your superpower?
I think my superpower is, and maybe some people on my staff will disagree, but I think it's I'm sort of an empathic listener. I think I can anticipate what people in my industry are thinking, but I'm also trying to be a very good listener, and oftentimes I've already developed an ability to solve the problem as they're telling me what the problem is.
And then, Kevin, the final question, which is, can you kind of walk us through a situation most recently when you found yourself uncomfortable?
Professionally, it would probably have been a couple years ago where we had a little bit of a hiccup in sales in 2014, and it was probably the most challenging of my professional life in regards to just having to be accountable to my partners at Weiland and trying to motivate our staff that we had some near misses. A few phone calls go differently and we would have had a great year, but some things went the wrong way, and that's just business. And so the ability to rebound from that and the ability to kind of not lose your confidence and kind of, as I guess they say in sports, keep your swagger,
right.
Keep that confidence. I rebounded from that pretty good, and we've had a couple banner years since then.
So let's take and think about this for a minute. The hiccup in sales becomes the disruption, right? That's the why we kind of tipped us over the edge and said we need to kind of look at the world in a little different way. And with all of the reasons in which it was time for Weiland to do something different, kind of walk us through what that reinvention journey looked like.
Mm-hmm. Well, from an ownership structure, we're fortunate in that Craig and Scott Weiland, who are the namesakes of Weiland, their father Don started the company in 1958. They really have always been sort of forward-thinking in regards to succession planning. I arrived at Weiland in 2000, but when I got there had already been 3 or 4 other people who had bought in. In 2005, I bought in as a partner, and all told, since they began to diversify the ownership, there's 9 non-family members who are shareholders at Weiland. And I think that's really important for listeners to understand that certainly if you have a talented family tree and sons and daughters want to take over a company, that certainly works. But in this case, Craig and Scott had identified that they really wanted to see Weiland grow. They had taken their father's company, which is sort of a quote-unquote small family-owned company, and they had taken it to the next level. And I think that they were wise enough to identify that they could grow it quicker by acquiring talent. And then the biggest problem we have in our industry is how do you retain talent? And part of the way that you retain talent talent is to invite people to have a piece of the action. So if you're a shareholder at Weiland, you're completely invested and you're in for the long run. And so, as I said, there's been 9 people who have bought into those.
So, Kevin, what happens in the decision-making process when we expand the intellect that comes in, as you're describing? So we have more thought, more intellect, more experience that comes into the decision-making process. What is the end result benefit to the success of the company?
Yeah, it's a great question. Weiland has some partners who have worked for example, for some other construction companies. And, one of the things, if you're a family-owned company and it's just, you and your brother or you and your brother and his son or something like that, you might not have that breadth of experience. But some of the partners that have joined Weiland have worked for some of our competitors, for example. And that's very good to have a diversity of experiences. And so they bring to the table a whole lot of insight into, well, here's how we did it at another organization. So these other 9 people have all worked for other organizations, and they don't really care about the history, not in a disrespectful way, but they have their own history. And so you get a collective sort of intellect that you wouldn't get if you were sort of just myopic or keeping it in the family.
Right. So the focus becomes where we're going,
right,
not where we've been.
Exactly.
So how does then, you're describing an internal change in the decision-making model. How does that change get communicated externally to the marketplace? And I assume you're going to tell us about how the name change has signified kind of a new position in the marketplace for your company.
Right. Well, it's a 2-step process, so I'll talk about the name change, but I'd rather talk to get that started. I'd just like to talk for a second about going through a really important planning practice, which is the adoption of a mission statement and a vision statement and some core values. In 2011, I said to our president, Craig, what do you think our mission statement is? And he said, well, we're an ISO 9000 company, and we have this quality statement, and it's basically says that, we're committed to understanding and meeting the quality needs of our customers. And there was a lot of, bullet points about defect-free products and continual improvement. And I kind of scratched my head. And concurrently with that, Mike, I had been teaching a master's level class because I was adjunct faculty at a local university here about developing a mission statement for your firm. And so I was kind of embarrassed, and I realized I don't think our firm has a mission statement.
Right.
So I asked Craig, our president, and Rob Kruger, who is now our CEO, would you guys mind if I, took that and ran with it? And they were like, yeah, that's great. It's one of these deals where you have the idea and they don't say, okay, yeah, we got that. They actually said, good idea. Take it and run with it. So I helped spearhead an effort. It certainly was a group effort, but interviewing about, at that time, 75 to 80 employees, and drafting a mission statement and coming up with something that we could all live with. And so that was the genesis of then this rebranding, which we did in 2016, where we went from the Weiland Daveco Corporation. It's a name that's hard to say. Is it Weiland or Weiland? It had a hyphen in it. It was a hard website address. Just so many things about it branding-wise that were difficult, and we just simplified it, and we rolled out in 2016 Weiland. A very simple name with a very simple iconic W logo, and all of that has really served our marketing efforts well, and really kind of helped us in every single market that we participate in.
So that's why you identified Simplify as one of the steps that you really could connect with on the 5 steps. So what is your message to others who are listening to this podcast, and why Simplify for you was really a defining moment in helping the company move on to the next phase?
Right. Well, again, back to the mission part of it, I would have days where I would be confused as to what should I do with my time today relative to sales, for example. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit in the construction industry. You get calls every day. Hey, I heard about this project, and you have to make a decision. I only have 8 to 10 hours I'm going to spend at this company today. Am I going to track down every single lead people throw my way, or somebody forwards you a newspaper article? And in our mission statement, when we developed it, we had a very key word in there, and it was that Weiland is dedicated to finding and serving lifelong clients through excellence in construction. And so the Simplify part for me, Mike, was finding. And you might say, well, why is he dwelling on that word finding? It's because we had committed ourselves to not taking the easy way out, to not saying, well, there's all this low-hanging fruit. We'll subscribe to some plan room services. We'll get daily email blasts about projects. Because guess what? There was about, 10,000 other people getting the same email blast. We said we want to get to the customer first. So we employ a team of 6 business development managers, and they are finding the customers before anybody else does. We're working with them. We're building relationships with them. And then we really want to retain them for life, because the second part of the mission statement is to serve them through excellence construction for the rest of their life, repeat clients. So about 75% of our annual volume is with repeat clients. So for me, the simplify part was, I now, sometimes when I get those, many different phone calls in a day, I literally look at the mission statement, which hangs near my phone, and I say, I'm looking for a particular type of customer, not just any customer.
So now you've really piqued my interest, because if you have shifted from reactionary sales to proactive, finding that right customer that is in your market niche, then how do you begin to use your listening and your problem-solving skill set in that next phase? We
move at lightning speed at Weiland. I'm really proud of that. I'll give you an example. Back in June, I got a phone call. I actually got a web inquiry. Somebody was on our website, and it's www.weilandbuilds.com. I'll give it a little plug. And we got one of those inquiries, like, you get them all the time. You think, oh, somebody's on our website looking. And they said, wonder if you could give me a call. Well, it got forwarded to me. I called them the same day. In fact, I think I called them within 5 minutes of them sending the email. You never know what's at the other end of that line. And lo and behold, there was somebody in Southeast Michigan who had heard about us and found us on the website and said, we want to build a building, we want to do an addition. And I said, what are you doing today? And I think he was a little taken aback. And he said, well, I'm busy today, but I can meet you tomorrow. I said, I'll come down tomorrow morning. What time's good? So what I'm saying is we react very quickly to customers, because customers that are willing to actually pick up the phone and call us probably already know a little bit about our brand and about who we are. But a lot of people, too much to my surprise, don't act that quickly and don't jump on opportunities like that. But when you're in our business and you're trying to, as you indicated, find unique customers, you have to act really quickly. When I got to that meeting, I brought somebody with me. We spent about 2 hours. We walked the site. I listened very carefully, and I was also extremely responsive. Within 48 hours, I was back to him with some ideas, and it just sort of morphs into, why would I want to work with anybody else other than this guy who seems to be making me the most important part of his day?
What is fascinating to me is you actually were able to add an important step before the listening, which is the importance of organizations, both profit and not-for-profit, moving quickly towards the customer. I think there's a tendency for businesses to assume that the customer will move towards them. But I think in the marketplace today, which has been reversed, the successful companies are the ones that move very quickly to the customer so they can listen.
Yeah.
And that's what I've really been understanding from you. And I know you're a runner, and I know you know the importance of pace and movement, right? And how important it is to move towards something as opposed to waiting for that to move towards you.
Right.
Can you explain how big of a culture shift that was in your company to move into that, move aggressively to the marketplace as opposed to the reverse?
Well, the best part was that the mission statement brought intentionality. It really, Craig Weiland uses this word a lot. It really codified what we had already been doing, but we had never really sat down and codified it. So now, when we hire a new business development manager, and these are the guys that, I guess, for lack of a better term, would be our salespeople. Now, when they're hired, we tell them, we want you to be fast and we want you to be assertive. I don't like the word aggressive because that has a negative connotation, but we want you to be assertive. And the other thing we want to do is we want to be extremely transparent. So the shift that took place was everybody's now pulling in the same direction. Everybody knows that there are certain types of customers, frankly, that we don't want to work with. We're not really that excited about working on public sector government projects, although we have done them and we can do them, and there are some that we excel at. But our people now very quickly are able to go in and see that there's potential here for more work. So, right, I told you that we're the repeat client construction manager in town. If we go into a meeting and we assess that there might be one shot here, and the reward for doing a good job this time would be that they're going to make us bid against 10 other contractors the next time, that might not be our kind of customer. And that's okay. It doesn't need to be like a hurt feeling situation. It might just be, you know what, maybe we're not right for you. And that is, to me, like the most liberating part of a business plan is when you can actually sometimes tell a customer, maybe I'm not right for you.
Right.
That's rare, but it's kind of a fun feeling.
Well, because in the business world, there is such a thing as a partnership. And as I've been listening to you and as I've been learning from you, the movement quickly towards a customer isn't to show necessarily aggressiveness. It's meant to show you're important to me.
Exactly.
And if you're important to me, then I'm listening carefully and I am looking for ways in which we can build a long-term relationship as opposed to, am I the lowest denominator in this particular project?
Right. There's an author, and I may say his last name wrong, but you probably know him. Is it Patrick Lencioni or Lenconi? He wrote this great book called Getting Naked, and it's all about being vulnerable and being transparent in front of the customer. And if you are willing to, he talks about giving the business away, if you're willing to work at risk and just be a solutions provider and not necessarily think of this as a transactional-based relationship, you will be, infinitely more successful because you've kind of moved it from a transaction basis relationship to really almost like a friendship. And so, like this individual that I was telling you about in my example, he very quickly saw us as a trusted partner, saw us as a value-added person, not as a general contractor. So we're really work hard at Weiland to not be a commodity. We try and be a value-oriented solution provider. One of our core values is solve problems before they come problems. And that's like a big deal in construction. When you're forward thinking and you're thinking about what could go wrong and you're using your vast database of experience to fix problems before they happen, that gives your customer great comfort.
Kevin, if people want to learn more about Weiland the company and Weiland the journey, how can they get a hold of you?
Okay. They can call us here in the Lansing area, 517-372-8650. Our website I already plugged is Weiland Builds, and Weiland is WIELAND builds.com. We've got our company history on there. We've got a lot of our great profile projects. I didn't mention, but we have 6 offices in the United States. We work in just about every sector. You'd be shocked to see that we build a $100 million paper plant in Indiana, but we were also building an 18-story condominium in West Palm Beach. I mean, we have a really fun and unique and diverse portfolio. So yeah, check out our website, give me a call. I love talking to people and I like to tell the Weiland story.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
So Jody, I've got to tell you that the message of simplification that Kevin put out there in terms of how you simplify your focus was really struck me as a takeaway for a lot of listeners.
Yeah, and I think some of Kevin's ideas strike a chord with those of us that maybe are a bit more traditional in our thinking in terms of using a mission statement. But some of his ideas are non-traditional too. So I like that he blends the two together. And the mission statement for him wasn't just, well, we should have one because everybody has one, but he really needed that to guide his focus.
I think that's absolutely right. Kevin is the second person that I can remember that's really talked about keeping the mission statement, if you have one, near your phone, so that as you take in prospective calls that may be a future business, you're able to sort through and understand whether it is really part of your mission or not. And for Kevin, there was one word in that entire mission statement that really meant something to him.
Yeah, the finding, right?
The finding.
Finding, which I think definitely resulted in a business decision to hire these sales folks, and I think he called them business development or business managers. But if finding was truly what they were going to do, in other words, they were going to do the sourcing, they weren't going to sit back and wait for leads to come to them, then they needed to have people that were going to do that. But I also really like in his mission statement this idea of lifelong customers. And he said, I mean, it's really translated on the revenue side. I think he said like 75% of their revenue comes from repeat customers. And that was a very strategic decision that they made, and it's captured in the mission statement.
So they had gone through the practice of chasing RFPs, trying to be competitive in a landscape that is ultra competitive. Yep. Until in their revised mission statement, they were able to key in on that word find. And then that was when the real realization took place that what they were looking for were business relationships that they went out and cultivated.
Right. That moving towards the customer.
That the business was moving towards the customer rather than the other way around.
Yep.
And in that way, then they could find those right customers that would appreciate whatever it was that they were selling. In other words, going back to a very relationship type of sales, which is a real key for a lot of people.
Well, and I think the immediacy of that relationship, how quickly they will connect and follow up and follow through. I know we've done just some landscaping work at our house this past summer, and we had some subcontractors that were going to come out and do bits and pieces of it. And there were multiple companies in this area, local companies, that I called and didn't even get a call back, let alone have somebody come out, walk through the project, give a bid. I mean, it's just crazy. You would think that this would be commonplace, this idea of service would be commonplace. And it's really, from my experience, and it sounds like from Kevin's too, it's not. I mean, this is one of the things that makes them shine.
Absolutely. I'm not a huge fan of long, lengthy mission statements. I think short and sweet is really important. And in the case of Kevin's conversation, the one word, which really helped him key in. I think the really interesting thing for me as I listen to people talk about mission statements or focus and clarity is how simple it needs to be, whether it's one word, whether it's a picture, how simple you have to really create focus to know what marketplace you're going after.
Right, it's that story. And, Kevin also talked about the fact that they use that story to figure out on the sales side who's going to make it and who's not. So when they're interviewing potential folks to come be their sales individuals, they're real clear. You are finding and you will move quickly. And then he uses the word assertive.
Sure. So let's now go into the next, I think, real strong focal point of the conversation was Kevin's comments about the value of listening and being a really good problem solver, because that fits right in, Jody, to what you were talking about.
Yeah. And I also think the value of ownership and this idea that this was a family-owned company that the current owner's father started years ago. And then the two brothers took it over. This idea of succession planning wasn't something they woke up one day at 65 and thought, oh my God, we got to do something. Because you and I have both been in those conversations too,
Absolutely.
where an organization hasn't thought ahead. Not only has this organization thought ahead, but their strategy is to bring in owners. And so Kevin got an opportunity to be one of those owners. And through that diversity of thought sitting around the table making the decisions, it's another big reason that they are where they are today.
Right. And we're not talking about owners as being an equity partner, even though they are equity partners. In this particular case, we're talking about ownership being in an ownership mentality. You're accountable, you solve problems, and you're interested in growth.
Absolutely.
If you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it pure reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.